So, hello and welcome back to Christine really cutting it along the fine edge because this chapter has to go up in like 3 hours. I had a very, very busy day. I spent all day today in the big city of Escanaba. And yeah, I just kind of got home, got unpacked, and sat down for a little bit. And then it hit me that I hadn't had my chapter read. I meant to do it last night, and I just didn't. So you're getting me doing it on just the bare edge. But you know what? We're still getting it done. I hope you guys are having a good day. I did put up a no talking video of me just kind of walking around the big city. I'll have another video of it either tomorrow or the next day with actually a little bit of editing. But our big city, it's kind of funny. It has, I think, 8,000 people. So I think that actually qualifies as a tiny town, but it's the biggest place within at least a 2 hour radius of me. So, and they have a Walmart and a Menards and all of those things that actual cities maybe have. They also have a really nice, cute little, very old downtown, which is the video that will be coming up later. And, it was a good way to kill time. I just kind of walked all over the city. Don't know how many miles I put in today, but it was a lot. I parked where I was having to be at the dentist, dropped off what I had to drop off, and then spent the next several hours just wandering because why not? I wasn't going to drive an hour home and then an hour back to pick up my stuff and then another hour home. So you just have a day in the city. It was kind of fun. I hope you also had a good day. We are going to be reading another chapter of Ivanhoe. And the quote at the start of today's chapter is from Aura, a tragedy. It's good that they let us know that it's a tragedy. If you remember in our last chapter, we got to transfer back to Cedric the Saxton and his little party, who I think the biggest thing we got informed of was that everybody wants to marry Rowena. I don't think they've consulted her about who she wants to marry, but I think she wants to marry Ivanhoe. I hope she wins because, it's her choice. At least it should be. And that was where we left it. They were going to make camp, and it looked like, or they weren't going to make camp. They were trying to make their way and were picking up a pace. Also, poor Girth, our swineherd who was serving with Ivanhoe, has been retaken by Cedric the Saxton, and they shot at his dog. That's a jerk move. I was about to say something else, but we're just going to go with jerk. That's a jerk move. So now let us move on to Ivanhoe with a quote from Aura, a tragedy. A train of armed men, some noble dame, escorting, so their scattered words discovered, as unperceived I hung upon their rear, are close at hand and mean to pass the night within the castle. And that's Aura, a tragedy. I think the real tragedy is none of that made any sense to me. It sounds like maybe there's a thief following a group of people. I don't know. But now it's time to move on to chapter 19 of Ivanhoe by Sir Walter Scott. The travelers had now reached the verge of the wooded country and were about to plunge into its recesses, held dangerous at that time from the number of outlaws whom oppression and poverty had driven to despair, and who occupied the forest in such large bands as could easily bid defiance to the feeble police of that time frame. From these rovers, however, notwithstanding the lateness of the hour, Cedric and Athelstine accounted themselves safe, as they had in attendance 10 servants, 10 besides Wamba and Girth, whose aid couldn't be counted upon, one being a jester and the other being captive. It may be added that in traveling this late through the forest, Cedric and Athelstine relied upon their descent and their character, as well as on their courage. The outlaws, whom the severity of the forest laws had reduced to this roving and desperate mode of life, were mostly peasants and yeomen, and they were mostly Saxons, and they were generally supposed to respect the persons and property of their own countrymen. So as the travelers journeyed on their way, they were alarmed by many cries for assistance, and when they rode up to the place that they heard the cries from, they were surprised to find a horse litter on the ground, next to which sat a young woman richly dressed in the Jewish fashion, while an old man, whose yellow cap proclaimed him to belong to that same nation, walked up and down with gestures expressive of the deepest despair, and wrung his hands as if affected by some strange disaster. When asked by Athelstine and Cedric, the old man could for some time only answer by invoking the protection of all the patriarchs of the Old Testament successively against the sons of Ishmael, who he said were coming to smite him, hip and thigh, with the edge of his sword. When he began to come to himself out of this agony of terror, Isaac of York, for it was our old friend, was finally able to explain that he had hired a bodyguard of 6 men at Ashby, together with mules for carrying the litter of one of his sick friends. This party had undertaken to escort him as far as Doncaster. They had come thus far in safety, but having received information from a woodcutter that there was a strong band of outlaws lying in wait in the woods, Isaac's mercenaries had not only taken flight, but they had taken off with them the horses which bore the litter, and they had left Isaac and his daughter without any means of either defense or retreat, ready to be plundered and probably murdered by the bandits, who they were expecting at any moment to come down upon them. "Would it must but please your valors," said Isaac, in a tone of humiliation, "to permit these poor people to travel under your safeguard. I swear by our law that never has a favor been conferred upon a child of Israel since the days of our captivity that will be more gratefully acknowledged." "Dog," said Athelstine, whose memory was of the petty kind that stores up all kinds of trifles, but particularly trifling offensives. "Dost thou not remember how thou didst beard us in the gallery at the tilt-yard? Fight or flee, or compound with the outlaws as you like. Ask neither aid or company from us, and if they rob only such as you, who rob all of the world, well, I, for my own share, shall hold them as honest people." Cedric did not assent to the severe proposal of his companion, though. "We shall do better," he said, "to leave them 2 of our attendants and 2 horses to take them back to the next village. It will diminish our strength but little, and with your good sword, noble Athelstine, and the aid of those who stay with us, it will be light work for us to face even 20 of these rogues." Rowena, somewhat alarmed by the mention of outlaws in force and so close by, strongly seconded the proposal of her guardian. But Rebecca, suddenly quitting her dejected posture and making her way through the attendants to the palfrey of the Saxon lady, knelt down and kissed the hem of Rowena's dress. Then rising and throwing back her veil, she implored her in the name of God, the same one that they both worshipped, and by the revelation of the law upon Mount Sinai, in which they both believed, for her to please have compassion on them, and not to let them go forward without being under their safeguard. "It is not for myself that I pray this favor," said Rebecca, "nor is it even for that poor old man. I know that to wrong and spoil our nation is a light fault, if not a merit with the Christians. And what is it to us, whether it be done in the city or the desert or the field? But it is in the name of one dear to many, dear even to you, that I beseech you to let the sick person be transported with all care and tenderness under your protection. For if evil chance him, the last moment of your life would be embittered with regret for denying that I'm asking of you." The noble and solemn air with which Rebecca made this appeal gave it double weight with Rowena. "The old man is feeble," said Rowena to her guardian. "The maiden is young and beautiful, and their friend sick and in peril of his life. Even if they're Jewish, we cannot, as good Christians, leave them in this extremity. Let them unload 2 of the sumpter mules and put the baggage behind 2 of the serfs. The mules can transport the litter, and we have led these horses for the old man and his daughter." Cedric readily assented to Rowena's proposal, and Athelstine only added the condition that they should travel at the back of the party, where Wamba might attend to them with his shield of boar's brawn. "I've left my shield in the tilt yard," said Wamba, "and has been the fate of many a better knight than me." Athelstine blushed deeply, for that had actually been his fate on the last day of the tournament, while Rowena, who was pleased in the same proportion, as if to make amends for the brutal jest of her unfeeling suitor, please asked Rebecca to ride next to her. "It were not fit that I should do so," said Rebecca, "where my society might be held a disgrace to my protectress." By now, the change of baggage had been hastily achieved, for the single word outlaw rendered by everyone sufficiently alert, and the approach of twilight made the sound more impressive. Amid all of the bustle, Gurth was taken from horseback, in the course of which removal he prevailed upon the jester to loosen the cord with which his arms were bound. It was so badly refastened, maybe on purpose, on the part of Wamba, that Gurth had no difficulty in freeing his arms completely from the bondage, and then, gliding into the thicket, he made his escape. The bustle had been considerable, and it was some time before Gurth was missed, for, as he was to be placed for the rest of the journey behind a servant, everyone supposed that one of the other companions had him in his custody. And when it began to be whispered amongst them that Gurth had actually disappeared, they were under such immediate expectation of being attacked by the outlaws that it just wasn't held convenient to pay much attention to Gurth at all. The path upon which the party traveled was now so narrow as not to admit with any sort of convenience more than 2 riders next to each other, and it began to descend into a dingle traversed by a brook whose bands were broken, swampy, and overgrown with small willow trees. Cedric and Athelstine, who were at the head of the party, saw the risk of being attacked in this pass, but neither of them having had much practice in war, they had no better mode of preventing the danger that occurred to them that maybe they should just hasten through the defile as quickly as possible. Therefore, they advanced without much order, and had just crossed the brook with a part of their followers, when they were assailed in front, back, and sides all at once with an imperiosity to which in their confused and ill-prepared condition, it was impossible to resist. The shout of, "A white dragon! White dragon! St. George for Merry England!" Those were the war cries adopted by the assailants as belonging to their assumed character of Saxon outlaws, and it was heard on every side, and on every side enemies appeared with a rapidity of advance and attack that made them seem as if there were more of them than there were. Both of our Saxon chiefs were made prisoners at the very same moment, and each under circumstances expressive of their character. Cedric, the minute that an enemy appeared, launched at him with his remaining javelin, which, taking better effect than the one that he had hurled at Fangs, nailed the man against an oak tree that was behind him. So, thus successful, Cedric spurred his horse against the second attacker, drawing his sword at the same time, and striking with such inconsiderate fury that his weapon hit a thick branch which hung over him, and he was disarmed by the violence of his own blow. He was instantly made prisoner and pulled off of his horse by 2 or 3 of the bandits who crowded around him. Athelstine shared this captivity, his bridle having been seized, and he himself forcibly dismounted long before he could even draw his weapon or assume any posture of defense. The attendants, being loaded with baggage, surprised and terrified at the fate of their masters, also fell easy prey to the assailants, while the Lady Rowena in the center of the cavalcade, and Rebecca and Isaac at the rear, all fell under the same misfortune. Of the entire group, no one escaped except Wamba, who showed upon the occasion much more courage than those who pretended to have better sense than he did. He quickly possessed himself of a sword belonging to one of the servants, who was just drawing it with a tardy, irresolute hand, and he laid about him like a lion, driving back several people who approached him, and made a brave, though unsuccessful, attempt to rescue Cedric. Finding himself overpowered, Wamba at length threw himself from his horse, plunged into a thicket, and, favored by all of the confusion, escaped. Yet our valiant jester Wamba, just as soon as he found himself safe, hesitated more than once if he should maybe turn back and share the captivity of a master to whom he really truly did like. "I have heard men talk of the blessings of freedom," he told himself, "but I wish any wise man would teach me what use to make of it now that I have it." As he said these words out loud, a voice near him called out low, "Wamba!" And at the same time, a dog, who Wamba recognized to be Fangs, jumped over and fawned on him. "Girth!" said Wamba, with the same low tone, and Girth immediately stood in front of him. "What's the matter?" said Girth. "What mean these cries and all the sword noises?" "Only a trick of the times," said Wamba. Everyone's been taken prisoner." "Who?" said Girth. "My lord and my lady and Athelstine and Hundebert and Oswald." "What?" said Girth. "How did they come to be prisoners, and to whom?" "Our master was too ready to fight," said the jester, "and Athelstine was not ready enough, and no other person had been ready at all, and they are prisoners to green cassocks and black visors, and they lie all tumbled about on the green like crab apples that you shake down for your pigs, and I would laugh at it," said the honest jester, "if I could, but I'm weeping." And at that he shed tears of unfeigned sorrow. Girth's face kindled. "Wamba," he said, "you have a weapon, and your heart was ever stronger than your brain. There are only two of us, but a sudden attack from men of resolution might help. Follow me." "Where and why?" said the jester. "To rescue Cedric." "But you renounced his service." "That," said Girth, "was but well he was fortunate. But follow me." As Wamba was about to obey, a third person suddenly made his appearance and commanded them both to halt. From his dress and his arms, Wamba would have conjectured him to be one of the outlaws who had just attacked his master, but, along with the fact that he wore no mask, the glittering baldric across his shoulder, along with the rich bugle horn that it was supporting, as well as the calm and commanding expression of his voice and his manner, made him, notwithstanding the twilight, recognize this man as Locksley, the yeoman who had been victorious under such disadvantageous circumstances in the contest for the prize in archery. "What is the meaning of all this?" he said. "Or who is it that rifle and ransom and make prisoners in these forests?" "You may look at their cassocks, they're close by," said Wamba, "and see whether they be children's coats or not, for they are just as much like yours as one green pea could be to another." "I'll find out for sure soon," said Locksley. "And I tell you, on peril of your lives, do not stir from the place that you are standing, not until I've returned. Obey me, and it will be better for your masters. Yet stay, I must render myself as much like these men as possible." And as he said this, he unbuckled his baldric along with the bugle, took a feather from his cap and gave it to Wamba, and then drew a vizard from his pouch, and repeating his charges to them to stay still, went to execute his purposes of spying. "Shall we stand fast, Girth?" said Wamba, "or shall we give him a leg bail? In my foolish mind, he had all of the equipment of a thief, too much in readiness to be himself a true man." "Let him be the devil," said Girth, "if he wants. We can be no worse waiting for his return. If he belongs to that party, he must have already given them the alarm, and it will not help us to either fight or fly. Besides, I have late experience that some thieves are not the worst men in the world to have to deal with." But Locksley returned in just a few moments. "Friend Girth," he said, "I have mingled among those men, and I have learned to whom they belong, and where they're bound. There is, I think, no chance that they will proceed and do any actual violence against their prisoners. For 3 men to attempt them at this moment, well, it would be sheer madness. For they are good men of war, and they have, as such, placed sentinels out to give the alarm. But I trust that I will soon gather such a force that we can act in defiance of all of their precautions. You're both servants, and, as I think, faithful servants of Cedric the Saxton, the friend of the rights of the Englishman. He will not want English hands to help him in this extremity. So come with me, at least until I get some aid." And saying this, he walked through the woods at a quick pace, followed by the jester and the swineherd. It was not consistent with Wamba's humor, though, to travel for very long in silence. "I think," he said, looking at the baldric and the bugle that he was still carrying, "that I saw the arrow shot which won this gay prize, and that not so long ago." "And I," said Girth, "could take it on my haledom that I have heard the voice of the good yeoman who won it, by night as well as by day. and that the moon is not 3 days even older since I heard the voice last. My friends, said the yeoman, who are what I am, is not important right now. Should I free your master, you will have reason to thank me, and think me the best friend you've ever had. And whether I am known by one name or another, or whether I can draw a bow as well or better than a cowkeeper, or whether it is my pleasure to walk in the sunshine or moonlight, these are matters which, since they don't concern you, you don't need to worry about. Our heads are in the lion's mouth, said Wamba in a whisper. We should get them out how we can. Hush, said Garth. Be silent. Don't offend him with your folly. I trust sincerely that everything will work out all right. And that is the end of chapter 19. All right, well, this is at least a departure. Either that or it's been so long since I've seen Robin Hood that none of this sounds familiar, which makes me excited. Like, we're definitely getting some action. I kind of figured that our Robin Hood character, Mr. Robin of Locksley, I shouldn't call him Robin of Locksley. I don't think we've had his name said as Robin. But I kind of figured he was going to be coming back soon. So, huzzah for Robin Hood. Robin Hood, riding through the forest. Anyway, I'm excited. I am enjoying this book. I do wish that it were more updated with modern language. I do try to, and this is where I do kind of change things as I'm reading them. I try to cut down on some of the these and thous if I can get the entire sentence and get the context as I'm reading it out loud. So I never read exactly word for word, which is why I would not really be a good audiobook reader, because I just can't help it. If I'm reading ahead at least one sentence from what my mouth is saying, and the sentence that I'm kind of processing that's going to be coming out of my mouth doesn't make sense to me, I try really quick to make it make sense. I don't know if that made sense, though. It's bad when I don't make sense. Anyway, it's been a really long day, and I am hoping to find myself something to eat, get this uploaded, and I'll see you tomorrow.